They use my algorithm to sign million-dollar contracts. But then, my name was removed from the accounts. I nodded and thanked them. 48 hours later, the whole system collapsed. They didn't fire me. That would have made too much noise. Instead, they slashed my salary in half right after our product hit $1 billion in revenue, but long before that memo hit my inbox at 6:08 in the morning. I was just a girl in a cold basement apartment with a second-hand laptop and a stubborn belief that I could build something better. I didn't have much, just a stack of ramen packets, a leaky ceiling, and a voice in my head that wouldn't shut up about how broken data systems had become. Every company was building AI to exploit behavior, to sell ads, to manipulate habits. I wanted to design something different, something that respected people while still understanding them. So, I started small. I spent nights mapping neural logic on a cracked whiteboard, and days writing code that could learn without stealing. I called it Novaline. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. A predictive engine that didn't rely on invasive tracking, just math, intention, and time. Then, one Friday afternoon, a message blinked across my screen. "Hey Jess. Got something for you. Call me Elena." I hadn't talked to Elena since we graduated MIT. She was brilliant, gritty, sharp. The type of person who never forgot who helped her during all-night coding marathons, turns out. She was now leading back-end architecture at a rising startup called AITA. They were building something in the AI space, fast, funded, and desperate for a solution that didn't cross ethical lines. "I told them about your system," she said when we finally spoke. "Blake, the CEO, he wants to meet." I almost laughed. Me? The girl who hadn't seen sunlight in 3 days? But I cleaned myself up, zipped the broken side of my laptop bag, and showed up. The office was sleek, brick walls. Whiteboards covered in potential. They didn't have a product yet, just a promise and a name. That's when Blake leaned forward and said, "You've built something special. Let's build it bigger." And for the first time in months, I felt it. Hope. That quiet, stubborn kind. The kind that lives just long enough to be betrayed. But that part comes later. Hope carried me through the front door of AITA. After months of solitude and screens, I was finally stepping into something that felt real. The team was young, fast-talking, caffeinated. Everyone moved like they were running out of time. The energy was electric. And for a moment, I believed I had found a place that would finally value not just what I could build, but who I was. The first week, I was brought on as a temporary consultant. Blake insisted on it being a trial run. Though it was clear he already planned to keep me, he'd walk by my desk, nodding in approval, sometimes dropping lines like, "The board's already excited about what you're building," or "Let's get you locked in soon." Then, 3 days later, he asked me to step into the conference room. Blake Thurston had a natural charisma, sleek suits, soft voice, always calling people by their first names like they were lifelong friends. I walked in with a notepad. He handed me a folder. "Your full-time offer," he said, leaning back casually. "We're ready to bring you into the fold officially." The contract was clean. High salary, stock options, a fancy title, Director of Cognitive Systems. It should have felt like everything I'd been working toward, and yet something tugged at me. I flipped to the final page. There was no mention of intellectual property, no clause about prior inventions, no clear language on tech ownership. I hesitated. Blake watched me carefully, then smiled. "Something wrong? I don't see anything about IP." I said, "Who owns what I've already built?" He chuckled like I just asked if water was wet. "Jessica, ideas are cheap. What matters is the team that brings them to life. You've got something good, but this company is where it'll become great. And that takes more than code. It takes all of us." He said it kindly, reassuringly, and in that moment, I wanted to believe him, so I nodded, signed, and shook his hand. But that night, after the buzz wore off and the city lights dimmed into quiet, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the contract again. Something still felt off. I pulled out my old hard drive, the one with every iteration of Novaline, every log file, every Git commit. I checked timestamps, version dates, submission trails. They were mine, all of it. Built before AITA, untouched by any contract. So I opened my laptop, logged into the US Patent Office, and submitted my official application, Jessica Harper, Sole Inventor, Predictive Behavioral Model. Privacy-protected AI hit submit at 11:59. And with one click, I gave myself something Blake couldn't offer: control. Trust is powerful, but trust with a backup plan, that's survival. I knew the demo was important. Everyone at AirSync had been buzzing about it for weeks, their first big industry showcase. Blake called it our moon landing. I worked 12-hour days tightening the logic, optimizing the behavioral feedback loops, even helping craft the pitch deck when no one else could explain the math behind the model. But when the internal invite for the demo event went out, my name wasn't on the list of speakers. I assumed it was a mistake, a logistics thing. Someone would fix it. No one did, so I went anyway. Took a back row seat in a cold, dark conference hall filled with hundreds of venture capitalists, reporters, and tech leaders. The AirSync logo beamed across a massive screen. And then Blake stepped on stage, smiling, confident, casual in that curated way. Founders perfect. He was followed by Madison Chen, the new head of product. I'd barely spoken to her outside of emails. She hadn't touched a single line of Novaline's code, yet there she was, standing beside Blake, laser pointer in hand, ready to explain how their system transformed AI ethics in real time. The screen changed slide after slide, algorithm flows, diagrams, visuals I had drawn in my apartment at 2 a.m. months ago, my framework, my logic, no mention of me, not a word. I sat there frozen, gripping the conference badge around my neck like it might anchor me to something solid. People clapped. Cameras flashed. And somewhere deep inside, something cracked. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink properly. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Elena. Just one photo. A screenshot of the original slide deck. My name clearly labeled at the bottom right of every page, underneath the image. She wrote, "I didn't know they were going to do that. I'm sorry." I stared at the message until the screen blurred. They hadn't just taken the credit. They had erased me deliberately. Completely. When Blake wrapped up the presentation, he waved toward the screen like it was an afterthought. "This," he said, "is what happens when brilliant teams work together." I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I just got up, walked out into the lobby, and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't my team. Not really. I had given them my mind, my nights, my best work. And in return, they'd taken my name off the story, and that hurts in a way even betrayal doesn't fully explain. The email came in at 6:08 in the morning. No greeting, no explanation, no call before, no follow-up after, just a cold string of words buried inside HR language due to internal restructuring. Your compensation has been realigned to reflect new operational priorities effective immediately. Your base salary has been reduced by 42%. I reread it 3 times, then stared at the ceiling of my apartment, too stunned to feel anything at first. A $1 billion valuation just hit the company dashboard the night before. My model had powered that. My system was the backbone of their success, and they cut my pay. I showed up at the office anyway. Maybe someone would say something. Maybe it was a mistake, a technical glitch. I told myself all sorts of stories on the elevator ride up to the 30. But when I walked in, no one looked at me differently. No one said a word, like it hadn't even happened. The weekly all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9:00 sharp. The entire company filed into the open atrium. I sat near the back, clutching my notebook with white knuckles. Blake stepped up to the mic, his usual charming smirk in place. "We've had an extraordinary quarter," he began, eyes scanning the crowd like a proud general. "And part of leading well means putting resources where they drive the most return. That's why we're investing more into the teams who bring real, scalable value." There was no mention of cuts, no mention of who had paid the price, just applause, backslaps, a carefully curated speech about efficiency and vision. But it didn't end there. Later that afternoon, Elena sent me another message, a photo this time, from the rooftop, champagne, custom banners. The engineering team, the new engineering team, was celebrating their performance bonus milestone, one I never knew existed. I looked at the budget document she attached. I shouldn't have seen it, but there it was in plain text. Budget reallocation sourced from Depth Z, 9, Cognitive Systems, J. Harper. They took my salary and poured it into a rooftop party for people who didn't even understand how the core model worked. That was the moment the humiliation finally settled in. Not loud or dramatic, but sharp and cold. Like standing in the rain in your best dress and realizing no one's coming. I wasn't invisible. I was disposable. And the worst part, they didn't even care enough to lie to me in person. They let the system hit send. I used to be in every meeting, product syncs, strategy calls, late-night war rooms when a system bug sent everyone into panic mode. People listened when I spoke, not because they had to, but because they knew I had built the thing they were all standing on. Then, one Monday morning, my calendar was blank. At first I thought it was a sync error. I refreshed, logged out, logged back in. Nothing. No invites. No group threads. Not even the bi-weekly architecture review I had led for the past 6 months. Then I checked my email. Dozens of old conversations, threads I'd contributed to, technical debates I'd won, were now read only. I couldn't reply, couldn't forward, couldn't even tag myself back in. I walked to the IT desk, trying to sound casual. "Hey, I think something's wrong with my access." The guy didn't even look up, just mumbled, "Security policy updates," and pointed to a vague memo on his screen. That afternoon, I sat through an all-hands I hadn't been invited to. I watched it from the stairwell, listening through the open crack of a conference room door. They were discussing product roadmap revisions without me. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody noticed. The silence was louder than anything Blake or HR could have said. I wasn't being punished. I was being erased. No confrontation. No justification. Just slow surgical removal that night. I stayed late, pretended to work at 8:37 in the evening. The floor was mostly empty. The cleaning crew hadn't even arrived yet. I opened my laptop, instinctively checking system health logs out of habit. Access denied. I tried again using a manual path, still blocked. Then my phone buzzed. "Elena, you okay?" I didn't know what to say. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I could answer. Another message came through. "They've changed your privileges, but your old dev token is still alive. You used it during the sandbox test. Remember?" Attached was a system log export, a month's worth of back-end behavior, CPU spikes, model calls, API chain links, all using my framework. Every core function still running on my original algorithm. They hadn't rebuilt anything. They hadn't replaced me. They just locked me out and kept running my system like I didn't exist. I opened a hidden terminal and plugged in the token Elena mentioned. To my surprise, it worked. I was in. The admin panel hadn't been touched. No new version names, no core refactor. The algorithm powering AITA's billion-dollar success. Still Novaline. Still mine. I leaned back in my chair. The room suddenly colder than it had been moments before. It was the strangest feeling, alone in a room I helped build, watching people I used to work beside pretend I'd never been there at all. I wasn't just isolated. I was surrounded and invisible, and yet, somewhere beneath that isolation, something else sparked quietly in my chest. Proof. They still needed me. Even if they pretended they didn't, the truth had been sitting in a drawer beneath my bed the whole time for weeks. I'd let myself believe I was powerless, that AITA could erase me and run my work without consequence, that Blake's charm and the bored silence carried more weight than the years I'd spent building Novaline from scratch, but all it took was one late night, one breath of clarity to crack the illusion. I was alone in my apartment, lights off, laptop open. The only sound was the low of the city outside my window and the clack of keys as I pulled up my records. A folder marked Patent Docs Pending blinked back at me. I clicked. There it was. Patent, no. 7942 IUB. Title, Adaptive Behavioral Model Using Privacy-First Logic Layers. Inventor, Jessica Harper. Status, approved. Active date of grant. 8 months ago, I stared at the screen for a long time, my pulse in my ears. The document was short, clinical, but to me, it read like a weapon forged in silence. I had done it. I'd followed through, filed it, protected it, and they had never once asked because Blake assumed that when you hire someone, you own them, because no one ever imagined the quiet girl in the corner would read every line of her contract, would protect herself before she needed to. I scrolled further. Attached to the filing was my original disclosure email sent 3 days before I signed AITA's employment agreement. It included a PDF of my system outline, a GitHub link with early commits, and a timestamp. That email alone created a perfect legal firewall. Everything I'd built before signing belonged to me, not AirSync, not Blake, not the board, me. The realization hit like a clean gust of air in a room that had grown stale. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I wasn't a discarded name in an HR system. I was the legal owner of the core engine that powered their entire product line. My name wasn't just on the code. It was on the law. I printed the patent, held it in my hands. It wasn't flashy, just black ink on off-white paper, but it was enough. Enough to stop them. Enough to take everything back on my terms. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry or small. I felt awake. They had cut my salary. They had locked me out. They had erased my name. But in trying to delete me, they forgot to check who actually held the keys. And now, I had all of them. The next morning, I didn't open my inbox. I opened a war room. I walked into an old co-working space I used to frequent, now almost deserted, except for a few night owls and burned-out coders. I sat up at the far corner table, plugged in my laptop, and pulled out the patent printout. The ink still smelled fresh. Then I made the first call to Daniel Roth, a soft-spoken intellectual property lawyer who looked more like a philosophy professor than legal counsel. We met briefly 2 years ago when I attended a privacy law seminar. He remembered me instantly. "Jessica," he said, "you built something big, didn't you?" "They built an empire off my name," I replied. "I need to stop them from selling my invention. I have full documentation. The patent was granted 8 months ago." "Send it all," he said calmly. "This will take precision, not drama." By noon, I had a draft of the cease and desist, 5 pages of cold legal fire, citing violation of U.S. Patent Juror 79442B, and demanding AirSync immediately cease usage and commercial application of Novoline. The document didn't threaten. It warned. Still, stopping them wasn't enough. I wanted to rebuild. I wanted to take back what was mine, but better. So I made the second call to Mylin. She had once been AirSync's chief of research, sharp, methodical, deeply ethical. She was one of the few people in the early days who had taken time to understand Novoline beyond its surface value. We weren't close, but we had shared a mutual respect that didn't need words. She'd been ousted quietly 2 years ago, pushed out for being too academic. The usual dismissal reserved for anyone who refused to bend vision for investors. I found her number through an old Slack thread Elena had kept archived. With a deep breath, I hit dial. "Jessica," May answered, surprised. "I'm calling as the legal owner of Novoline," I said, "and I have an idea." So 20 minutes later, we were on a private video call. I explained everything, what AirSync had done, the pay cut, the lockout, the patent. I showed her logs, evidence, strategy. "I have the system," I finished. "You have the people." May didn't blink. "Atlas Neural has been circling the problem for months," she said. "We couldn't match your system's learning speed without breaching ethical lines. But if we work together, I'm in," I said. She paused. "I want full transparency in the architecture. No black boxes, no exploitative backdoors." "Agreed." Then she smiled. "It was small, but real. You just gave me a reason to fight again." We set a plan in motion. A new version of the platform, NovaMind, would be built from scratch using my core model, restructured under an ethics-first framework. I'd retain co-ownership. She'd lead the infrastructure team. That evening, Daniel sent the cease and desist to AirSync's legal counsel, and I sent May the first commit to our private repo. 2 hours later, Elena texted me just one sentence. "They just called an emergency board meeting." I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "Game on." The cease and desist went out at 7:04 in the morning, sent directly from Daniel Roth's office to AirSync's legal department. It arrived in a PDF attachment marked Urgent, IP violation, patent 791,422 billions by 07/30. The company was on fire. I didn't need to be in the building to feel it. Elena kept me updated from inside. Text after text came through like a live news feed. 7:42 in the morning. Blake's office door just slammed shut. 8:03 in the morning. Legal pulled Madison out of a product briefing. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. 8:27 in the morning. Client success just froze 3 accounts. They're waiting for direction. Everyone's panicking, but I wasn't panicking. I was drinking coffee in a quiet cafe across the river, watching the fog roll between buildings. The same skyline that once felt untouchable now looked small, fragile, like the illusion it had always been. At 9:15, I got the call. It wasn't from Blake. It was from Julia Pike, AITA's general counsel, polished, and too clever by half. Her tone was measured, but I could hear the tightness beneath it. Jessica, we'd like to resolve this amicably. No one wants a legal battle. Blake asked me to offer you a consultancy agreement, high retainer, flexible hours, and of course, full credit attribution for the original work. She paused, clearly waiting for my gratitude. I kept my voice even. You mean the work you denied I had any part in? There was silence. Then, let's be reasonable. Reasonable, I repeated, tasting the word like a bitter pill. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for more time or a better deal. Instead, I opened my laptop and replied to Julia's follow-up email. Attached were the original timestamps, Git commits, early blueprints, and a clean PDF of my granted patent. I also CC'd 5 attorneys, Daniel, 2 specialists in IP enforcement, 1 retired federal judge now practicing arbitration, and Carla Montez, a bulldog known for dismantling tech companies who'd stolen from solo inventors. I ended the email with 3 words, see you soon, then I hit send. No flair, no threat. Just facts. Cold, clean, legal across the city. AITA's executive Slack channel lit up with panic. Blake tried to reassure the board. She just wants a payout. He insisted. We'll settle. Rebrand the platform. Move forward. But he was wrong. I didn't want money. I wanted the truth acknowledged by noon. 3 enterprise clients had paused all active engagements. 2 issued formal inquiries into the patent conflict. And Elena told me someone from engineering had printed out the cease and desist and taped it to the break room door like a warning. By 3 in the afternoon, AITA had scrubbed all promotional material mentioning original system architecture. Their website went into soft maintenance mode. And Blake? He still hadn't called because he knew there was nothing left to say. I'd played by the rules. I'd waited. I'd given them every chance to fix what they broke. But now I was done playing, and the silence I gave them in return was louder than anything I could have said. The ballroom at the Conrad Hotel was packed, every seat taken, every eye forward, and every badge bearing the logo of someone who once ignored me. I stood just behind the stage curtain, fingers cold despite the heat of the overhead lights. Across the stage, the Novamind logo glowed, sleek, modern, framed in soft blue and silver. Beneath it, ethical intelligence reimagined. We had spent weeks refining that tagline. Now it was real. Maylene appeared at my side, clipboard in hand, nerves well hidden beneath her quiet intensity. She leaned in. You ready? I looked at her and smiled. I've never been more ready. And I meant it when we stepped onto the stage. A hush fell over the crowd. Mai opened with her usual directness. No hype. No theatrics. She introduced Novamind as the first commercially viable privacy-forward AI infrastructure with verified ethical compliance. She laid out performance specs, privacy controls, transparency features, all backed by data. Then she turned to me. And now I'd like to introduce the mind behind Novamind, the original architect, the inventor of the framework that changed everything. It took me a moment to move. Applause began, soft at first, then swelling, pouring over me like something tangible. I stepped forward, breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just the crowd or the lights. It was everything beneath it. The years alone at my kitchen table, the silence after the salary cut, the erased credits, the betrayal. All of it gathered behind my ribs like pressure held in too long, and now it burst. I walked to the podium. I didn't plan to speak, I began, voice steadier than I felt, because for a long time, I didn't think I'd ever be allowed to own my work again. But today isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding, about showing that innovation doesn't have to come at the cost of trust. Behind me, the screens shifted to live system performance charts. Novamind running 10 times faster than anything AirSync had ever produced using a fraction of the resources. With zero data compromise, a whisper ran through the room. In the front row sat Riley Grant, CTO of Vanta Systems, one of AirSync's biggest legacy clients. For months, they had been Blake's prized account, used in every investor pitch. Now Riley was scribbling notes. I didn't think much of it until the break, backstage. One of Atlas's project managers, Theo, rushed in holding a signed document. His voice shook with disbelief. Vanta just inked a full systems migration, effective immediately. What? I asked. He laughed. They're pulling out of AirSync entirely. We just landed a $14 million contract. My breath caught. May stepped beside me again, a rare glint of emotion in her eyes. They came for the ethics, she said. They stayed for the speed. I turned away from the chaos, from the cameras and flashing screens, and looked at my own name on the welcome banner, Jessica Harper, co-founder, Novamind. It was there, bold, undeniable, and for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was exactly where I was meant to be. I closed my eyes for a moment, just long enough to feel everything lift. The shame, the doubt, the silence, all gone. Replaced by something louder, something true. 3 months after the Novamind launch, the penthouse floor of the old AirSync building belonged to us. Atlas Neural had closed the acquisition in record time. The headlines called it a strategic merger, but we all knew the truth. AirSync collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance, and we had quietly moved in to claim the ruins. Not out of vengeance, out of vision. I stepped out of the elevator onto the 35th floor, once Blake's kingdom, now just a beautifully lit space with polished concrete floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The same floor where he'd cut my salary reduced my value to a line item, and pushed me out with a smile. Now it was my office, my name on the door, my team filling the workstations, and my system, Novamind, running at the heart of every project across 2 continents. I moved to the window, fingers grazing the edge of the glass desk, taking in the view that had once felt like a world just out of reach. The skyline hadn't changed, but I had behind me. Theo, our project manager, stepped in, clearing his throat softly. "Hey Jess," he said. "You might want to know. Blake Thurston's downstairs. Security says he's asking to speak with you. Just 5 minutes." I turned slowly, eyebrows raised. "He used my name?" "Exactly. Said he just wants a conversation. Quiet. Off the record." For a moment, I said nothing. The room was quiet, but not heavy. "Should I send him up?" Theo asked. I shook my head. "No." He nodded once and turned to leave, but I stopped him at the door. "Actually," I said. "Tell him something for me." Theo turned back. "Sure." I smiled gently, but with the weight of everything that had come before it. "Tell him," I said. "Compensation's been realigned." Theo chuckled. The kind of quiet laugh that knows the whole backstory. "Got it." As he left, I walked toward the bookshelf, where the framed copy of my patent now sat beside a newer one. Novamind. Adaptive Ethical Framework v2.1. Signed by both May and me. Outside the window, the city moved on. Deals were being made. Products launched. People climbed ladders. Some honestly, some not, but in this moment, in this room, I felt no bitterness, no hunger for revenge. Just something cleaner, more lasting, honor restored. I had reclaimed everything they tried to take, my name, my legacy, my seat at the table, not by screaming, not by breaking the rules, but by being better, smarter, unshakably patient, the kind of woman they'd never see coming until it was too late.